Okay.
She gone.
She gone. I gotta turn myself off. Okay.
Okay, Jayla, it's all you.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jayla McCoy, your Kelowna Region State Vice President. We're happy to have you here today for today's live session. We appreciate the many individuals and organizations who support Virginia FBLA by sponsoring our activities and programs, including Highcock, Brown and Company in Abingdon, Morgan McClure Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Coburn, and Riverside Brick in Chesapeake. During today's session, you can use the chat feature to comment and ask questions that will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our speaker has been involved with FBLA for over half of his lifetime. He is a former member of all 3 student divisions and works at the FBLA-PBL National Center with the competitive events. He is a former club president for Toastmaster International organization dedicated to developing public speaking skills and a way to foster personal growth and self-confidence. He enjoys playing with his fiance's 2 dogs and traveling for ultimate Frisbee tournaments. Please welcome Aric Mills.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about public speaking, and we're going to be going over some general tips and tricks to kind of help you elevate your public speaking. Before we really get into that though, we have a small poll just to kind of gauge everyone's level of public speaking that they've involved themselves with so far and how they feel about public speaking. So the first question, if you answer none to that, you don't necessarily need to answer questions 2 and 3 as they pertain to people who have had some public speaking experience. But if everyone could go ahead and fill that out, that will help me tailor this just a little bit more. Brian, is there a way for me to see results? Aha, how about that? Pop it right up. All right, so it looks like everyone here has had at least some level of public speaking experience, with a few of you that have presented at FBLA, which is nice. All righty, so moving on to question number 2. It looks like an overwhelming majority of you felt at least nervous when you were going into public speaking, a little apprehensive, a little bit nauseous, a little bit happy, but a fair number of you were also excited, and that's good because public speaking should not be a scary thing for people. It's an opportunity to express yourself, and it is an exciting thing for you to get to do. And wow, nearly 90% think it went well, although it looks like maybe at least one person did not think it went well. But that's okay, because no one's perfect. And when we're doing public speaking, no one expects you to be perfect. So if it doesn't go well, that's all right. There's an opportunity for you to try again in the future. I want to start by talking about the important aspects of public speaking. And the first important aspect is to, 1, be prepared. Now, how do you get prepared? It's knowing what you're doing. Are you giving just a speech? Are you presenting? Will you be presenting with equipment? Are you going to be fielding any questions after that? Being prepared is also about being organized. Everyone's heard good speakers and bad speakers. If you've heard a good speaker, you know that thoughts flow logically from one point to the next. If you've heard a bad speaker, they kind of pop all the way around, going back from A, now to C, back to B, up to A, down to D. They're all over the board, and it gets confusing. Being prepared is also about practice, practice, practice. The second part of public speaking that is important is to be memorable. When you're giving a presentation, you're doing this presentation, speech of any kind, you're doing this for a reason. So make sure your audience remembers why you're doing it. And the third feature of good public speaking tips and tricks is to act confident. Now, please note, I didn't say that you had to be confident, just that you had to act confident. So, getting prepared. To give a bad example of getting prepared, I'll give you a little example from my own life. When I was a Toastmasters Club president, I had to give a certain number of speeches in order to achieve a certain level within Toastmasters. There are 10 speeches, and they build up from relatively easy to getting more complex in skill as they progress. As a Toastmasters president, I had already given 3 of my speeches and was set to give my 4th speech. Unfortunately, due to some work conflicts, I wasn't prepared for my speech. I thought to myself, well, 1, 2, and 3 went pretty well. This doesn't seem that difficult. I'm just going to go ahead and wing it. So I got up and gave one of the worst speeches of my life. I set a pretty poor example by not getting myself prepared when I was in a position that people were looking to in order to see how someone should be presenting themselves in a public speaking aspect. So there are many different ways to get prepared. The first thing that you need to know is what you're doing. Again, are you giving a speech? Are you giving a presentation? You're likely going to construct your speech for both of these in the same way and order, but for a speech, you won't be utilizing anything but yourself. So you're going to stand there and you're going to be talking to the audience and you're going to be utilizing your voice and your brain, and that's about it. For a presentation, you might be referring to something that your audience can see. Now that might be a small object that you have with you, or it might be a presentation on the board behind you. Note that I'm gesturing to a very white and blank board because I'm not using a presentation here. But that would be a different way of presenting than actually just standing here and talking. Will you have any equipment? Well, like I just said, what kind of equipment will you have is very important. If you just have something that you're going to be holding in your hands, referring to that is going to be a little bit different than referring to something behind you, as you're going to want to emphasize with the thing in your hand things that you're talking about. Where it will be is also very important. Are you going to be presenting something behind you or things to the side? Will you be fielding questions and having to give answers to those questions at the end? Ask yourself, what questions do you foresee people asking you, and come prepared with some responses to those questions. Not having all of those answers right away, not detrimental, but having some kind of in your pocket ready to go will help increase your confidence. Are you getting ready for a competition? So say you're in FBLA and you're going to have to do a little public speaking for a presentation. Well, what's one thing that can aid you tremendously in this public speaking? The rubric. Go by the rubric. Make it easy for the judges. Hit topic 1, topic 2, topic 3. It lists them in order, and if the judges can check them off in order, they are more likely to remember and think you did well because you're going straight down the list that has been provided for them. So, to get organized doesn't mean that you have to be organized before you even start putting down your thoughts. When preparing for this presentation, I started by writing things down and then moving them as I saw fit, where I thought they would best fit in the presentation. I even originally had 4 groups instead of the 3 that I told you about. Organization, which is what I'm talking about right now, was originally its own group before I realized it really went under being prepared. Also, 4. kind of an odd number. Three is just such a better number for people to remember things. You have the Three Stooges, you know, genies give you 3 wishes. And what most of you probably won't understand as a reference, there was Three's Company, the great show of I don't even know what decade, but it was fantastic. So we went with 3s. You don't have to have everything organized right off the bat. But once you get your thoughts down, now you can start to get them organized so they flow logically. Now that you've gotten organized, what's the next step? Practice, practice, practice. You have heard this 1,000 times at this point in your life. Guess what? You are never going to stop hearing it because it is never going to stop being true. Practice can be done using something other than your own speech that you need to prepare. For those of you who haven't had much practice with public speaking or would want to practice more, you can do an icebreaker speech. This is a very common first speech in Toastmasters to allow people who don't necessarily have the confidence or the experience to get up and get a little bit of experience under their belt so that in the future, when they're getting up there, they've already got this bit of confidence of, I've done this before. It's not a big deal. You can pick any subject you're familiar with, preferably something you're passionate about. And it can be structured, it can be unstructured. If you're going for structured, go for just a general opening, an easy body, and a very concise conclusion. And you just have to try and speak for about 4 minutes on that topic. Now, in order to practice, you have a lot of resources that you may not be thinking you have because a lot of people don't want to bother other people. You can practice on your friends. You can practice on your parents. You can practice on your siblings, and you can practice on your grandparents. I assure you, they love feeling helpful to you. And last but most importantly, you can practice on yourself. Record a presentation of you giving the speech and then listen to it. You will notice the little things that you have done that you can work on yourself. Go back, record it again, work on it. Keep doing that. As a good example of being prepared, I recently had to prepare for the Slate training presentation. It is a presentation that I gave to someone who is on this call, the one and only Mrs. Mills. And it was on a system that I had been working on developing for the National Center for a few months. So in my thought process, I already had this pretty nailed down. I knew everything about the system. I was just going to go in and start presenting. My boss suggested we do a trial run, and I begrudgingly agreed because she's my boss and she gets to make the decisions, and that's how bosses work. But it was also a phenomenal idea. So we did it with a few fellow employees who had not been exposed to the system yet. And while it went well, I did get lots of critical feedback that really helped take the presentation to the next level. Two of the pieces of advice that I got were that I was jumping around too much and that I forgot to cover something earlier in the presentation that when I got to it later on and started talking about it, confused them. This helped us to shore things up, and I feel, and Ms. Mills might be able to concur to this, that the audience walked away from there feeling very confident with the software and their ability to utilize it. Point number 2, how to be memorable. Let's start with a pretty bad example, again, from my life. And I'm going to pick on 2 people in this chat just a little bit, my younger cousins, Tate and Caden. Now, when I believe they were both still in middle school, they were involved in a school play. Now, this school play was about Aladdin. And my younger brother had this very funny idea, and I went, absolutely, let's do this. And that idea was for us to dress up as characters from Aladdin and then sit in the front row. So my brother went dressed as the genie, and I went dressed as the parrot Iago. And I had a giant bird suit on, and I sat right in the front row, right where everyone could see me. So the actors come on, they start presenting. Princess Jasmine can't even look at our half of the audience because she would be laughing too hard. It was very distracting. memorable, but very distracting. Not the way you want your memorable part to be. You want it to be concise and consistent with your message. So you're doing this for a reason. Make them remember why. There are certain ways that you can be memorable, and they don't have to be flashy or loud. You can be concrete in your details, nothing abstract. I have point A, I have point B, and it's going to result in C. Not this arbitrary thing over here might get us to this point. Facts, details, people remember those. Let's see. Language. Use language that they understand. If I came in here and started using coding language as an example to how you should structure a speech, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. If you're going to talk to a certain age range, make sure you're understanding and utilizing language that they will understand. Use personal stories and examples. I've already used 3 of them. I promise you I have at least 2 more. The important part of examples is positive association. You want someone to remember something as good, even if it wasn't necessarily a good thing, that you learned from something is a good, positive relation that they can make that will help them remember what you're talking about. You can also end with a call to action. A call to action, if you're giving a speech on volunteering, would be go down to your local shelter, serve soup, something like that. It gives the audience a message that they can attach your whole speech to as a direct result that they can then go and action themselves. Call to action. You need to decide what works best for you, and more importantly than that, you need to decide what works best for your message. A general public speaking discussion might not necessarily have a call to action. It might, and you can fit it in, but it might not be as memorable as funny personal anecdotes. As a pretty good example of being memorable in a funny way, I recently had the pleasure of listening to a presentation by Nick Western, an advisor at Thomas Edison High School and former Virginia State President and former National PBL Vice President for the Southern region. And Nick gives incredible presentations. He always has. I couldn't tell you what most of them are. And that's because I just have so many things, like most people do, going on and being in front of us. But I will never forget this presentation that Nick just gave. In it, Nick taught me to remember how to introduce myself in a networking scenario by remembering how Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride introduces himself. Hello. Greeting. What's my name? Inigo Montoya. All right, that's his name. You killed my father, prepare to die. Greeting, who you are, why you're there, what outcome you want to have. Now, that's a good thing for public speaking as well, but in the context of this presentation, that's something I will never forget because Nick showed me a video on it. The third point of public speaking is to act confidently. And again, I didn't say you have to be confident. I just said that you have to act confident. And those are 2 very different things. As a bad example, when I was in 10th grade, I competed in Introduction to Public Speaking at the Regional Leadership Conference for the Shenandoah region. It was my first time doing much public speaking. I had practiced a bunch, as my mother had made me do, thank you. But I probably hadn't practiced as much as I needed to. I got there, I shook the judges' hands, and then I stood behind the podium and I never moved. I never moved because I was afraid to leave my note cards. And I was afraid to leave my note cards because I was afraid of forgetting something. Now, I didn't bomb that speech, but I also didn't move on to the state leadership conference either. It's about little things. Both fortunately and unfortunately, I have a psychology degree. Now, some of you on here might understand why that's funny, but for those of you that don't, it's hard getting an industry-related field of work with a psychology degree. You have to go and get a master's degree before you can really get any involvement with your degree. The fortunate part of that degree is that I am fascinated with the human brain and how it works, and figuring out ways to get around small limitations that the human brain puts up. So one of the ways that you can get around not being confident, but at least acting confident, is to smile, even if you're nervous. If you smile, it sends a chemical in your brain around that says, hey, we're happy. And then it makes you happy. It's just this cool psychological trick. And when you feel happier, you feel better. And when you feel better, you act better. When you act better, you speak better. Another important tip and trick is to look people in the eye. Now, I know many of you have probably heard that. When you talk to someone, look them in the eye. When you talk to a group, try to look them all in the eye. Well, in some cases, you're going to be talking potentially to a pretty big group. It's pretty hard to meet the gaze of 1,000 people. The trick with that group, with a group of that size, is not necessarily to meet everyone in the eye, but to at least look at certain sections and address this group and then talk to this group. Even if you're not looking everyone in the eye, the fact that your head is moving is giving them an indication that you are now addressing them. If you're in a small group, you should be meeting their eyes, but a lot of people have trouble meeting the eye of someone else. It's a very intimate thing to meet someone and just look them in the eye as you talk to them. One of the tricks for this is to just look at their forehead or look between their eyes when you're talking to them. Instead of actually looking at their eyes, you're now seeming to look at their eyes, and you are being perceived as looking them in the eye without that bit of uncomfortableness. You do this enough, and eventually you probably won't mind looking someone in the eye. A confident person utilizes their space. If you'll notice that I have been standing here this entire time just presenting to you, and that's because I'm very limited in what space I have to utilize. If you're giving a speech to a small group and you have a small stage or a small area to work with, utilize that entire space. Utilize it to the advantage of your speech. Make your speech breakup fit with where you're moving on the stage. If you have a body, 3 points, and a conclusion, start at center stage with your body. As you are making your first point, make your way to one of the other sections of the stage. Stand there while you're giving that portion, and as you're concluding that portion, move back to home base or where you started. Now, when you're going on to your next section, move to a different section of the stage. This will help the audience remember when he was over here or she was over here, they were talking about point A, this is point B. So when you're readdressing those, you can gesture to those sections of the stage that you were standing in, and it will help bring that memory back of exactly what it was you were saying. Someone who utilizes their entire space has command of their entire space, and that's how it's perceived. If you see someone standing in one spot when they have a bunch of space to work with, they look rooted, they look scared, and they don't perceive as being confident. Use hand gestures. Now, when I say use hand gestures, I don't mean wave your arms around like the wacky waving inflatable arm selling tube men that you see next to a lot of car dealerships. Those are intentionally distracting. You're not going for distracting here, you're going for memorable and for confident. So, when you have a point, gesture. If you have a list of things that you're trying to get across, count them out on your fingers. It allows people to make specific mental breaks on, all right, that was point one, now we're on to the next point. The next point of someone who is at least seeming confident is to keep things rolling. Now, that's hard to quantify specifically, but if you forget a word, The only person who is going to know that you have forgotten a word is you, unless you make it obvious. So if I'm giving a speech and I forgot to say this previous portion, and I go, oh, wait, I need to go back and say this, gives off the appearance of someone who is not confident or organized. You're the only one that knows you've missed that point. Find a way to loop it back in, or if it doesn't fit, drop it. It's not the end of the world. If it's a very important point, you need to find a way to loop it back in. But even if you've forgotten the conclusion to point point A, and you now are on to point B, if point A ties in with point C, bring it in when you're talking about point C. Let's see. Oh, there we are. Going back to the question and answer from the be prepared section. Again, looping this back in, confident, going back to being prepared. It's okay to not have all of the answers if you do have some pre-prepared answers for questions. You might get thrown a loop. Someone might ask you a question that you might not have had before. Even with all of your practice, someone might not have thought of a question that you have now been asked from the judges or from the audience in general. It's okay to not have an answer. No one's perfect. No one has all the answers. But there are confident ways to get around not having that answer versus, I don't know, I'm sorry. And it's using language like, that's not information we've collected previously, but we will take that into consideration going forward. Or, unfortunately, I don't have that answer in front of me, and I'd need to look into that further. Answering questions like that, as opposed to, I just don't know, give off a sense of confidence of someone who can at least get that answer, even if they don't have it there with them. And the perception there is that, again, no one has all the answers. But it's okay to not have all the answers as long as you can get them and you are confident that you can get them. Some things to avoid. Avoid using filler words such as or like, so. You've probably heard me use a few of those. Again, no public speech is perfect. People are going to have those in there. And it's okay to have them in there. But they create a sense of disjointment, if that's even a word, with your speech. Instead of simply pausing to recollect your thoughts, now you have introduced another unnecessary verbiage in order to get your point across. In Toastmasters, we had someone in every meeting called the counter. And the entire purpose of that position was to record these verbal slippages that anyone getting up in front of the group would have. Now, if they had more than 5, you were supposed to only say you had more than 5. Our group was a pretty close-knit group, and we had a little fun with this in my club. And at the end of every meeting, instead of saying you had more than 5, someone would say, Eric, you had 41 ums. And that is a true story. There was a day that I had 41 ums. And instead of it getting people feeling down, it allowed us to feel better when we went to the next meeting and all of a sudden that number was down. And we kept a running tab for everyone of how they had done the previous meeting and whether or not they had improved from meeting 1 to meeting 2. And the overall consensus was that they had. And by doing that, now everyone was cognizantly trying not to do those things so that they could better their score. And by making a conscious effort not to do those things, they were creating better speech patterns. So, as a good example of at least acting confident, even if you're not confident, I will tell you about the first time I led a Toastmasters meeting as the club president. I was the club president within 3 months of the founding of the club because the club's founder and president had gotten a new job in a new area and was moving. So I was elected to be the replacement president. Now, our previous president had been to a couple of other Toastmasters groups. He had been involved with this meeting, that meeting, so he knew how they were run. He had done it before, he had had practice. I walked into my first meeting having never done this before. I was very nervous. People were counting on me, and I didn't know exactly what to do. But instead of letting that rule me, I smiled at everyone, and though I advise you not to actually do this, I was close to this group, and I apologize in advance for the mistakes I was inevitably going to make. Everyone laughed, and it broke my tension. So going in with the expectation of that you are going to make mistakes and that it is okay will help you break that tension. Find a way to break that internally, and you'll be good to go. I broke my tension, everyone laughed, and I did my best. Now, was it perfect? In no way, shape, or form. But was it enjoyable? I loved getting back up there every single time after that, and I think everyone in my club enjoyed themselves and my quirky presentation style themselves. So, to remember, get prepared. It's pretty easy to do. Everyone's gotten prepared for things before, but you don't have to be prepared as you're creating it. Be memorable. Don't be distracting, but be memorable. And at least until you do become confident, act confident. Trust me, you will get there. Everyone can do public speaking. It's not an exact science, but it can be fun, and it's a great way to express yourself. No one's perfect, and no one's expecting you to be perfect. So when you go up to do some public speaking, have fun with it. That is the conclusion of the presentation that I have, but I would like to open up the floor to anyone who is willing to do a little quick 30-second topic that they would be willing to speak to the whole group on to do a little practice for public speaking. I have a few topics here in front of me. All you have to do is introduce yourself. So you introduce yourself, I will give you a topic, and then just speak for about 30 seconds on it, and that's all. Would anyone like to volunteer? No one's brave?
I'll do it.
There we go, because I was about to volunteer someone. All right.
Okay.
Who are you and where are you from?
My name is Sarah Nugent, and I'm from Midlothian, Virginia, and I'm in the Tri-Cities region.
All right, Sarah. Describe the perfect vacation spot for me.
Wow. So that is a very good question because I want to go so many places in the world. That's one of my biggest dreams. I think right now my dream vacation would be Australia because it is just gorgeous and I really want to go scuba diving and I want to see the coral reef and all of the fish. I know somebody who lived and grew up in Australia, so I think it'd be great for her to take me around and just see what it's like. Australia has proven to be gorgeous through the pictures, and I love it. So I would love to see it with my own eyes.
30 seconds. Congratulations. Now everyone, see how easy that was? Thank you very much. We appreciate you volunteering. Would anyone else like to volunteer?
I'll do it.
All righty. Now, can you please tell me who you are and where you're from?
I'm Ashley Sowers. I'm from Midlothian, Virginia, and also in Tri-Cities.
Oh, two people from Midlothian. Virginia. All right. Let's see. Let's go with a fun one. If you can't get to 30 seconds on this, I will totally understand. Do you think Pluto should be considered a planet?
This is a very controversial topic about whether Pluto should be considered a planet or not. I feel like once you've included someone in a group, it just doesn't seem natural to take away its right to be there. Although it is proven to not have like land mass in it, I also feel like Saturn doesn't have land mass in it either and is just a gaseous planet. So I feel like if you're comparing those two and Saturn is allowed to be a planet and Pluto is not, I just feel like that's unbiased just because it's just ice and not gas. So that is my take on whether Pluto should be a planet or not. I feel strongly that it should still be allowed to be a planet since it had already been receiving that title.
Well done. Well done. Thank you. Now, I'd like to point out real quick what these two young ladies did with both of their speeches is that they started their speech by giving back the topic to me. So one of the things that they were able to do was take off some of the time by reiterating the concept to everyone and making it a part of their own speech. Would anyone else like to volunteer? You did a great job, by the way.
I'll go.
All righty. Okay, can you please tell me who you are and where you're from, and maybe what you did to your hand?
I am Charlie. I am from Blaine County, a part of the New River region, and I broke my thumb yesterday from loading the wood stove. So we're here. I'm happy.
Wow, that is terrifying. I'm so sorry. All right, let's see. All right, without saying the name, describe your favorite television show when you were a bit younger.
Wow. When I was younger, this actually was related to a piece of food that I really enjoyed. They were always so funny. And one of my favorite stories was it was a full family, how they just traveled around the block and they did ridiculous stuff. And it's always been a part of my childhood. I would like to also share that with you, that it's an amazing world out there. And this can also help you too.
Pretty close. That's pretty close. All right.
Yeah.
Now, would you like to share what the name of that show was?
Amazing World of Gumball.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you. Would anyone else like to volunteer? Probably do a couple more of these.
I'll do one, Eric.
Oh, yes. All right. Oh, Caden was the one that
Yes,
volunteered.
it is me.
Not okay. So shouldn't be surprised there. Well, first introduce yourself so that everyone knows who you are, please.
I'm Caden Mills. I'm from Warrenton in the Germana region. I'm Eric's cousin, the one he was talking about earlier in the play.
Nice shirt.
Thanks.
All right. Let's see. Where do you want to live when you get older?
Where do I want to live when I get older? I want to live in a small town, kind of, so I know everyone, like, so no one's an outsider, just sort of a good environment with a community. Everyone's like kind of friends, so that's where I want to live when I get older.
You've got 10 more seconds.
Like just open up a small business there. That would be nice, and sort of just have a family there. That's what I want to do when I get older. I want to live.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Thank you, Eric.
All right, everyone. That was my younger cousin, Caden. Really
Yep.
knocking that one out of the park. All right, let's maybe do one more, and then we can open up Q&A.
Can I do it?
All right, got a volunteer. Let's see. Excellent. Okay. What is your name and where are you from? I keep forgetting to do that.
Hi, I'm Reagan Kitts, and I am from the Germana region, and I go to Riverbend High School.
Oh, Riverbend. Those kids. It's okay, you got a great advisor. If you could live in a movie or book world, which would it be and why?
Can it be a TV show?
Absolutely.
If I were to live in a TV show, mine would be The Office world, just because I really love the characters in it and how over-exaggerated they are. And I think it would just be amazing to be with the whole cast, or as they are in their own world. So I would love to live in The Office and also get to meet all the personalities, especially Creed Bratton. I would also, because they're in a big city and I love cities, I would like to live in a city when I get older, because for what a job, oh, sorry, I ran out of time.
Keep going. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Everyone, congratulations. You all did fantastic. I know that that is not easy to do, but you all did a great job. So Brian, we can, or I'm sorry, Jayla, we can now open this up for question and answer if anyone has anything.
Okay, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask Mr. Mills, you could put it into the chat feature.
Mr. Mills, that's so
That kind of sounded weird when I said it.
You don't seem apologetic at all.
Or if you don't want to type it, you can also just ask him.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves if you guys want.
How did you become interested in public speaking?
That's an excellent question. Like part of it has to deal with how badly I feel like I failed at that example. When I was in 10th grade, I just became darned and determined to be good at it. And then I found that I had had a little bit of experience with it when I joined Toastmasters, and I utilized some of the experience that I had had to help other people who were very afraid of public speaking in general, and being able to help them really drove me to succeed in it in my own way. I wasn't able to get all the way through the first 10 speeches, though I am still able to work on them and will. But one of the greatest achievements I ever feel like I had was helping my vice president, who joined Toastmasters and became vice president to force himself to do public speaking, but he was utterly terrified, to work with him every single speech. And his first speech was a disaster, but he got through it. And by the time I left Toastmasters, he had completed 6 speeches, and by number 4, he was nailing all of them. So that's why I love public speaking. I see people get and become more confident, and it just really is inspiring in some ways.
Thank you.
Adam Klein asks, what is your biggest public speaking fear?
Besides a tear in my pants, let's see. My biggest fear is probably forgetting things, which is an easy fear, like I said, to overcome because I'm the only one that really knows exactly what I'm going to be saying. But tying into that, the fear of forgetting my conclusion, I guess. So being able to tie everything up is a big fear of mine, but that's pretty easy to overcome, particularly if you practice enough.
Another question is from Tate Mills. What is Toastmasters?
Toastmasters International is an organization, an international organization dedicated to increasing public speaking skills, but also general self-confidence through public speaking. Like I said, with the question 2 ago, that Luis, who was the name of my vice president, he joined that club in order to gain not only public speaking skills, but also general self-confidence. And I could see that day in and day out that he was increasing that, as well as all the other members. And so it's just this general organization that has spread across the world. That's, it tends to be for adults, though there are collegiate divisions as well. So it's a great organization. If you ever get the chance to join, I highly recommend it.
We have a question from Jorge, and he asked, how do you mentally prepare yourself before giving a speech?
Cold glass of water. I kind of run through the topics again, just to make sure that I've got everything in order. A lot of people do a lot of different things. I know some people like to meditate. There are some people that have some small, funny rituals that kind of get them mentally prepared, that if you do them every single time, If you do something before doing something else, every time you do that, it gets you prepared for the next scenario. It's another psychological thing where you essentially create a scenario in your head that you're now ready for.
And our last question is from Reagan Kitts, and she asked, how do you stop from saying words like and like?
So the way you do it in Toastmasters is you have someone count them for you when you're giving the speech. And like I said, with the practice, your friends, your family, grandparents, again, I cannot stress enough how much they want to feel helpful. Getting them to count those things for you is a good way for you then to realize how many times you're saying it. Once you start counting them, you kind of become mentally attuned to counting them. So if you'll notice, I have stopped saying them as much as this presentation has gone on. And that's because I realized in the beginning of the presentation that I was saying them more. And now I'm starting to pause instead of filling in one of those filler words. So get them to practice with you, count them with you, and then as you go, you start to become mentally attuned to when you're doing it.
Okay. I think that's it for the questions. Thank you everyone for volunteering yourself and asking questions at today's presentation. And thank you, can I call you Aric?
Yes, you can call me Aric. Please don't call me
Thank you, Aric, for giving
My
us
father is on this presentation. He's Mr. Mills.
Thank you for giving us tips today about presenting. A recording of this session will be available on our Virginia FBLA YouTube channel. And don't miss tomorrow's 3 p.m. session on how to dive deep in a sea of volunteering opportunities. Let's see how Virginia FBLA members can continue creating a world of opportunities.